Okay. College classic. Did you say college classic campuses? For sure you did. We're reading Dr. David Jeremiah's Facing the Giants in Your Life. Is there a giant in your life? Is there someone in your life trying to stop you from excelling? Is there you know how Smoking the Bandit was, or Dukes of Hazards, or all those guys? They always had law enforcement coming against them, crooked cops and stuff like that. Is there a crooked cop in your life coming against you? Crooked sheriff? God will beat them every time. This is an overview. It's one thing when you and I have experienced an experience of failure in our private lives. A failure is known only to a small circle of friends and family, but it's totally different thing when you're the most important political leader in the world and your every move is reported live by the news media around the world. Such was the case with President George Bush when President George Bush became ill and vomited at a state dinner in Japan. Unfortunately, including the Prime Minister of Japan and the effects of his ill health. Is there something going on in your life where people are judging you publicly? You know, they used to do that in the Babylonians came to Jerusalem to judge, and they sent spies, King Nebuchadnezzar, and they attacked everyone they possibly could that were Jews, and they judged them publicly and ridiculed them publicly in front of everybody, and they followed them around and they judged them. And from what I understand, there was spiritual content involved with following them. They literally had a different spirit than the Jews had, so they were capable of doing things in the spirit the Jews weren't capable of doing, which was following them. You ever see a drone in the air following you around? Well, these guys were like spirits following you around, and they laughed and they thought it was funny, and it was a great big joke to them. But it's sort of the Jews' fault because they knew these people had different gods, and they let them in and they let them reside with them, and you're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to live on the outskirts, not the inskirts. But that's what happens when we do that. America is suffering that today with all these other gods coming in. ISIS and Islam and so forth and so on. Gods that won't behave themselves. If you know anything about Islamic gods and laws, they take priority. And you really can't do that. I mean, you can worship your God, but you have to understand there are laws here, and you've got to obey them. And they say, no, you don't have to. But you do. Now, as far as where the Jews are concerned, they were followed around and ridiculed by Nebuchadnezzar until he attacked them. The Romans did the same thing. And here's a really good one. The Germans did that to the Jews in Germany just before the reign of Hitler, where he took over. And they ran to the Russians for help, and the Russians tried to help them, and they beat on the Russians and raped their women. So that kind of gives you an insight about what we're dealing with today. Let's finish. Granted, that probably doesn't qualify as a personal failure. We don't normally hold people responsible for illnesses they have no control over. But try telling that to former President Bush. He probably felt himself a failure when he was embarrassing, when his embarrassing moment in Japan took place. Indeed, when he had laying down on the carpet in order to be attended by his physician, he moaned, "Just roll me under the table until dinner is over." He got a sense of humor even at a bad moment like that. That's the Bush family for you. Yeah, they know what to do. At least his failure didn't cloud his sense of humor. A bit better example of what we traditionally think of as failure happened in 1957 when the Ford Motor Company released to the public what was called the car of the decade, the Edsel. It was supposed to be the most dramatic advance in engineering and design since the invention of the automobile half century earlier. Unfortunately, it turned out to be the biggest bomb in the history of the automotive industry. It was, to put it mildly, a colossal failure. Ford's best efforts to succeed turned out to be the worst effort in the company's history. Life is filled with failure, whether presidential, corporate, or personal, or even sheriff's departments. The person who does not learn to manage failure, to defeat the giant of failure, will soon find himself buried under a mountain of disgrace and shame. But the person who learns to profit from a failure will find himself climbing over high mountains of accomplishment. I will. What the giant of failure means to trip you with can turn out to be a ticket of the future and to the future. But only if we can understand failure from God's perspective. And we do. We understand that we got to get back up. We got to keep going. We got to keep trying. We got to forgive. We got to love. And we got to ask God for help and all that we do. This is College Classic Campus Hits. I'm TcYbarra. God bless you. Have a beautiful day. I tell you.